Welcome to the Sound Corner, starring Chris and Michael Verba.
Welcome to the Sound Corner podcast, or as we've been themed, the Florida podcast. Thanks for that. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you for sitting in here with us tonight and listen to us talk some shit.
Talking some shit.
That there is my fantastic co-host, Michael. Michael, how you doing? What's going on?
Oh, I'm super tired. I just got off work.
My man's been working pretty hard. I can't say the same.
Are we working hard or hardly working?
Am I right, fellas? Sweet Muffin, thank you for the 4 months. Hello. Yeah, so usually the past few episodes we kind of just been like shooting shit in the intro, but we are a music podcast. I'd like to take this opportunity to share what we've been listening to lately. And if anyone could take away anything from it, anything to help. Michael, have you been listening to anything good lately?
I mean, I've been listening to kind of just like stuff everywhere, like sporadically. Although I did want to mention, I thought this was kind of cool. I don't know if it's cool or if it's a sign of somebody selling out. But the wonderful, super talented Phoebe Bridgers, who has slowly been on the rise for the last couple years. She has a song in the new Minions movie that's coming out. So I would say that's a pretty sure sign that she's made it as an artist.
Minions rock, dude. I don't know what you're talking about. It's pretty sick. Well, also,
it's a good song too. It's kind of weird. I'm wondering how it's gonna fit into the Minions movie.
It also does count that there was that video going around on YouTube of Bo Burnham in the audience for Phoebe Bridgers, I think.
Yeah.
At the Greek Theater or something.
Yeah, because she so when Inside came out last year, and obviously great special. We all really loved it. The music was incredible for it. When that came out and that the song That Funny Feeling came out, that was the song that resonated really, really hard with a lot of people, I think, especially in this day and age. And Phoebe Bridgers said that it was one of those songs that she wished she had written herself. So she had a lot of respect for the song, and so much that she added it into her set for her tour that she's been on.
Yeah, it's a good cover. It's also on Spotify and everything too, so you can actually stream it now.
Yeah. And but yeah, in the first few shows of her doing that, Bo was in the audience at one of the shows, and I don't know if he's ever said anything about it, but it seemed like he was into it.
I wish I wrote White Woman's Instagram. That's a really good song. It's probably my favorite.
If we're all gonna comment on a song that we wish we wrote from Inside, I wish I'd wrote either Sexting or All Eyes on Me.
Oh yeah, those are both really good. It's crazy how if you watch the outtakes, he had a lot of 45-second songs in it. It's amazing that even I feel like I could have written Biden or what's the other really good one?
The Future.
Yeah, The Future
was really good.
I could have. It's very repetitive, but this the droney synth and everything was really good. I feel like I could have done it.
Right. It's sorry. It's very minimalist in the way that Lord's first album is kind of minimalist, where it's a lot of there's not actual I mean there's melodies, but it's a lot of really low droning synths. And it was really interesting to see Bo kind of take that direction with his music, especially with a lot of the outtakes being like that on Inside. I don't know, there's something I really like about it. I always really liked Royals by Lorde when that song blew up. It's just there's not a whole lot going on as far as the music goes, so the vocal melodies kind of have to fill the space for it.
Yeah. I don't want to discredit Bo at all. I couldn't have actually written that stuff. The point of me saying that is that the music is so simple, it would go completely over my head on how to write it, and it required Bo's greatness for it.
Exactly. And you know me, I've always been a really big stan of, like, I guess simplistic music, if you want to call it that. Like, I've always been of the train of thought that bands like Neutral Milk Hotel, the bands where you've only got like 4 or 5 chords in a song, if you can take a song and like play the same 4 chords over and over again in the song and have it come out really great, that takes a lot of talent to do.
Yeah, and it's like the songwriting process for me is a lot of overthinking, so I wish I could step back a little bit and do that. But as far as stuff that I'm listening to, I actually saw a meme on Facebook, everybody. Do you believe it? I saw a meme. It's kind of going around for the cool people. It's basically what your favorite shoegaze band says about you.
Oh no.
And
yeah, I saw that.
I took one artist away from that I've seen on like their name everywhere. Narrowhead. Yeah, Narrowhead. They're kind of like really grungy, shoegazy, and the caption for it was "You miss Nirvana." That's what this shoegaze band says about you. And I was like, okay, I can try that.
Weren't we talking about? We were kind of talking about that on one of the podcasts that we did. With
It was
what was it? Pale Gold.
Yeah, Tyler from Pale Gold. Name drop.
Yeah, we were talking about how there's been a resurgence of shoegaze, but it's a more like grungy, kind of like alt rock shoegaze.
Yeah, and I'm super here for it. Narrowhead is very good. I suggest everyone check him out.
It's a big vibe. I saw that My Bloody Valentine was on that.
Yeah, it was
that
like number one, and Death Heaven and everything. And
I'll never get. I can't. This is, I think, my ultimate hot take is that I cannot get into Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. It literally sounds like vacuum cleaner music.
Hey, that's a compliment, or if anything.
I have a huge amount of love and respect for the album because the story behind the album is a really great one. Great, insane, whatever you want to call it. Kevin Shields, the guitarist, was such a perfectionist that he basically drove his label bankrupt by trying to make the album. But a lot of the things he was doing with his guitar on that album have never been like replicated exactly. So it was a lot of like he was really thinking outside the box, like about different ways that he could just use the guitar as an instrument and like how he could play it differently to create different sounds. And it's cool. It's a really cool sounding album, but I'm not one of like the people that's gonna dick ride on it.
Did bankrupting the label pan out for them? I would say no.
I would say, all right, so I don't know if the label ever bounced back once they actually put Loveless out, but I would imagine if the label did bounce back, I would say today it probably paid off because that album is very highly respected at this point.
Yeah, if you're on everyone's favorite music groups on Facebook, it is. But still,
it's like a mucore essential.
So we stay away from it. But I want to.
It was Death Haven though, and you listen to them, so
more or less. I want to move it along. This is kind of a long interview. I'm particularly stoked on this one, just almost for the fact that we almost have the same last name as this guy. That was kind of the most exciting part for me. But until I think the pronunciation is way different, so that was kind of a bummer. But I want to move it along. Our guest today started out writing and recording music under the band name The You back in 2003, and then formed the Pennsylvania-based alt-rock band Meeting of Important People and released their debut self-titled record in 2009. Since then, have performed and toured in the regional area of Pennsylvania, put out 4 studio records, and as of this year, released a brand new live record, In Your Car. He also formed and tours in a children's comedy duo band called Josh and Gab. Please welcome Josh Verbanets. And if you haven't heard of them, I'll run a clip for you, give you a little taste, and I want to apologize in advance in case the audio is a little strange. It was a little last minute. He had to do the interview out of his car. It was amazing. Everybody sit back and relax and enjoy us hanging out with Josh.
We just met, but I don't think he will for long. That kid right there, he's the one who should be scared. That kid right there, he's the one who's got the strength. He ain't down there, Brittany Lane.
Welcome to the Sound Corner, starring Chris and Michael Verba.
Time ago. That's so funny. That's why whenever you had messaged me, I said, wait, if you guys are from out of state, we mostly just do like regional stuff now as MOIP. And we're all like dads, I mean, houses and stuff. We don't travel. We play, a lot around this region. So that's why, I was curious. And when you said the U, man, there are a lot of memories there for sure.
That's awesome. So how do a lot of people end up finding Meeting of Important People, or how did people find the U, or how do you find that people come across your music?
Well, we started more like at the tail end of the analog world a little bit. Like the U in particular was the analog world, right? Like 2004, 5, like the kind of very end of big label analog times. And so the way that you found out about bands was like early internet. It's funny to even think of that as early internet because the internet was 10 years old, but blogs, MySpace, you guys might be a little younger than me. Did you experience MySpace, or was that
Yeah.
kind of a little before your time?
Yes, yeah, no, MySpace was I think becoming really, maybe not really big, but it was big when I was in middle school still. So yeah, I was on MySpace for a while.
Yeah, or even before, when Facebook was still thought of as like this academic thing, the creative social media website was mostly MySpace. So that was really a huge marketing thing for us in the first years of being a band, But when we formed Meeting of Important People, or MOIP, whatever, I say MOIP because MOIP, that was still like a person-to-person selling physical CDs. We'd have like a CD release show, and people mostly learned about the band from actual radio play. We had like regional radio play. We have a great like our NPR affiliate or our adult album oriented station in Pittsburgh is WYEP FM, which is a great public radio station, and they were very big supporters of Meeting of Important People. And it kind of turned us into being a little more than just like your friend's band at the time. It got us, we seemed like a real band to people in Pittsburgh. And from there, we were playing quite a bit with other indie bands, right? So we'd go to other towns and we'd sell CDs there. But it was still a little more analog, even in 2008, 9, and 10. And now it's totally different. Like, right, people find out about you from Spotify playlists, and we had placements in different TV shows and stuff, and web series.
That's one of the things that I really miss about MySpace is MySpace was really big for, I think, the music community and a lot of people discovering bands that they'd never heard of before. So it's cool that you brought that up. How old is For the Masses by the U? Like, when was that recorded?
Man, it's kind of hard to say because the album it's like a compilation. You might be able to tell when you're listening to it. There'll be like a song that clearly sounds like a bedroom demo right next to a song that sounds like it was recorded in a real studio. And that's because that's how it was. The U was my little recording project. It was like a band that I had with friends as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. I didn't even really start the band. I was like a slightly older kid that when I would go back to my hometown on breaks from college, some of the kids that were still in high school that knew that I played music, I would just kind of help them out and play with them. And a lot of them didn't really write songs, so they would kind of play my songs. It was very flattering and very fun. But then little by little, that different versions of the U with different friends from high school and my hometown turned into more of a kind of a quote unquote real band. But the whole time I was mostly making these little demos. I would usually write songs and just record them myself on like a Dell laptop, not even like a MacBook or anything cool. It's like a literal Dell laptop with like a PCI like audio card, like an actual, you'd have like an installed audio card and just a computer microphone like you'd see back in the day, like in Office Space or something on somebody's computer. And I just got good at using like early freeware recording programs to mix track myself up, sing harmonies with myself. I had a drum kit. So almost like Brian Jonestown Massacre, just some, without even realizing it, like trashy little indie rock songs and little pop songs and psychedelic songs. So at some point, the story, it gets real complicated, but I had a label deal. I was signed when I was maybe about 21. There was a guy who, I think for the purposes of this broadcast, I'd prefer not to use his specific name or the company's
sure.
specific.
That's fine.
For any number of reasons. But we had a label deal, and we had the opportunity to make real recordings from these demos. And as it usually does, it kind of all fell apart. It was a pretty bad experience, but some of those recordings ended up on that album For the Masses. So it was a mix of things that I had recorded as a 19 and 20-year-old just in my parents' basement, next to some of these songs that had been recorded with studio musicians in Chicago a few years later when we had this label deal. And eventually it was put out by this company and this guy just as a like, yeah, we'll just shut the kid up and here's this record. And nobody ever heard it. To this day, I barely even know if it made it into stores. I think it was physically in like some Best Buy stores. I ended up really kind of distancing myself from it. At the time, I thought I would never play music again. It was a pretty negative thing as a young man,
Yeah, that's completely understandable. So just for the sake of like entertainment, I'll tell you about how I discovered For the Masses, and that was, I actually discovered it through Pandora. I was on a Neutral Milk Hotel station, and Bad Person popped up, and I was just like instantly smitten with the song. Which it seems like a lot of people have that reaction to that song because it's got like close to like 200,000 plays. So that's really awesome. But of course, I'm one of those people that once I discover something cool, I kind of have to deep dive into like the rest of the album. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that the rest of the album is just like infectious song after infectious song. So really awesome.
That makes me so happy to hear, man. No one ever, this may sound funny to you, but I've never really had much of a conversation with anyone who has heard the You, who wasn't just like my friend I'm from Pittsburgh. So anybody who wasn't really from here, who knew me at the time. Oh, your question had been, how old are those recordings? So some of them they're from as early as summer 2003. So some of them are about 19 years old.
Wow.
And then the later ones that were done in a studio were done, I think, as late as summer 2005. So it's kind of like a 3-year period of me. Some of them were these old demo recordings, and some of them were later when we had the label deal. And at some point, the label, I don't even remember, I think I had some say in it. I voted for which versions I thought were best. It's weird. It's like one of those stories that you hear a lot. Bands like The Laws, There She Goes. I think they had kind of, not that we're in any way at that level or that good of a songwriter, but a similar thing where like a young dude got obsessed with trying to re-record demos and work with different producers, and it took years to put anything out, and then what finally came out was some kind of compilation of that stuff, But
the album sounds pretty consistent, I think, listening to it. And I'd read at one point a long time ago when I first discovered the album, and you could still physically buy it on Bandcamp, there was a little I guess like just linear notes about the album, and I remember reading that it talked about how you had recorded it kind of like over like a span of like a couple of years, and that it was with different people. But the album sounds really consistent considering all that, and I think somebody who sat down and listened to it would probably not notice that it wasn't just recorded as one cohesive thing. So I think that speaks pretty loudly to you as an artist. Like I said, just really awesome job. And I thought it was funny that you brought up The Laws. I kind of feel like you like a lot of like British invasion music or like 60s music.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah, a lot of those songs in that era would be written as a fake insert band, a fake Kink song, a fake Who song. Oh, there's so many, right? Lindsay Short. They're I don't mean to cheapen them by saying they're fake versions, but they would happen because I was young and I would hear the Who sell out, or an album that like it was like going from black and white to Technicolor in The Wizard of Oz. I'd hear a song that I'd never heard, and I'd walk around the rest of the day obsessed with that kind of song. And by the end of the day, I would realize that I would be singing some made up song in that style, you know? So yeah, I loved a lot of that music, and a lot of singer-songwriter stuff. Loudon Wainwright. I liked Paul Simon at the time. I loved Kurt Cobain. Like Nirvana was really my favorite band when I was a kid, a preteen.
I've heard a lot of comparisons of like, not a lot, but a couple comparisons between like the You or like Meeting of Important People with like Ray Davies and the Kinks. Were the Kinks like a big influence on you?
They were, and it's funny, I don't hear it too much. I think maybe I kind of sing like him almost by accident, just like someone trying to sing who maybe isn't a great singer, but is at least good at emoting or something, and saying something a little sarcastic. But yeah, I really, for sure, for 20 years, I really have heard that a lot of people think that we kind of sound like the Kinks. I always thought we sounded like, my goal when starting the band was to sound like if a little 3-piece garage rock band was playing Radiohead songs. And so that would be like Pablo Honey songs and the Bends and OK Computer. What if like just a little 3-piece band was playing that without the extra instrumentation? How would I do that if I was one guitar player? And I always thought I was singing like Tom York or something, but of course I'm not. I really am just kind of yelling like Ray Davies, you know, or Dave Davies even too.
It's funny because I'm very picky with like, I guess, vocalists or like singing voices that I like. I have to say I really, really do like your singing voice a lot. And when I was going through like videos on YouTube of like you playing music or like Meeting of Important People, and I came across a video of you covering Father Christmas by the Kinks, and I could definitely hear the similarities to Ray Davies for sure, which is weird because I don't think you normally sound like him. I do think that like I can hear the comparisons on like, especially like on For the Masses, like Lindsay Schwartz almost kind of feels like a Kinks song to me, not like in the way that it's like, oh, this is a Kinks song, but like almost like the way that the guitar melody works a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That was written when I worked at a video store. All of the best, that period of time that you're talking about with me right now was probably when I was like 20 to 23 or something, or 19 to 23. And it's an amazing, magical time where I couldn't stop writing songs. I would work in a video store, work in a restaurant, and I'd come home late at night and just be writing down songs and making little demos. And at the time it was before, you know, iPhones. So if I had an idea for a song at the video store, I'd have to go to the actual landline phone at the store and tell a customer, hey, wait, shut up a second. And then I'd call, I'd call either my parents' answering machine, or I did have a cell phone, but I'd call my own voicemail and sing it into my voicemail. So for many, many years as I was starting, maybe once a month, I would hold up my flip phone and stick the microphone into it and record like the 8 or 10 little ideas that I had written that month into my computer, you know? It was pretty janky.
I love that because I mean, obviously now we have like mini computers in our pocket. We've got our cell phones, and I do the exact same thing. If I'm like at work and I have like a melody or something that pops up in my head, I'm like, all right, let me like run into the bathroom and like hum this into my phone really quickly. But I love the idea that this has always been a thing that musicians have done even before we had like the technology to do it in like an easy way, I guess.
I heard like Elvis Costello would run to a payphone in a restaurant and call an answering machine. You said something interesting. Do you hear melodies in your head? Like, do they kind of come to you, or you get an idea for a vocal melody and then you have to make sure you record it before you forget it? Or
in a sense, yeah. I wouldn't say it's like Brian Wilson levels where he would just like hear entire songs in his head, but every once in a while, like, yeah, I'll hear like a vocal melody or something in my head. And it'll just kind of come out of nowhere, and I'll be like, all right, I need to do something with that because there's no way I'll remember that later.
Yeah, that to me is the purest form of, when we talk about writing songs, to me, it's not the craft side where you sit and you go, well, I need something that rhymes with dog. It sat on a log and then I was in the bog. It's more that weird moment where you feel like you're a vessel for something else, right? Where you're in a half asleep dream state. Or for me, it was always like, this will sound like I'm trying to be Brian Wilson. Somebody would say something to me, and if they said whatever they would say, if it had an interesting cadence or if it just was its own little hook, sometimes it would become like a little piece of music. You know, when I met the drummer in MOIP, Matt Miller, is one of my best friends. The first time I met him, he told me that he knew it. I said, like, how did you get here? Did you have a hard time finding the practice space? And he said, no, I know every street in this town. And him saying, I know every street in this town, it just became like, that's such a wonderful hook. And it became its own little melody, you know, in my head. So those moments for me are the best songwriting moments, right? When you just get a melody idea.
Yeah, for sure. Did that mean that you had to give him like songwriting credits, and like when that ended up on Ghost Whisperer, you were like, oh, I have him to thank for that pretty much?
I always credit him. It's like a Ringoism, right? Because they would always say that Ringo came up with the great little, like, well, that was a hard day's night, wasn't it? Like the little kind of slightly screwed up, you know, would have their own kitschy, you know, flavor to them, and they were good hooks. Matt is actually a great songwriter himself. Our song $50, he wrote like the B section to it, the little chorus, and other songs that we've done he's written. He writes beautiful melodies. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's always good to have like people collaborating with you and like helping write songs. But I liked what you said about sometimes it's kind of a cruel thing. Sometimes you can sit down and you can try and write a song for hours and hours and come up with nothing, and then every once in a while just something like clicks like that. Like I've had songs that I've written in like 10 minutes and I'm like, this was meant to come out. Like, why can't it be like this all the time?
Yeah, totally. To me, it's the best marriage is when you have a melody idea and a lyric or like hook idea that are the same thing. If you hear the phrase that is like your little hook, whether it's your opening line or if it's actually your chorus or if it's a good middle eight, and it's just married to a melody where you can't imagine it being phrased any different way, and it just came to you like that. To me, that's like 99.9% of songwriting. Now you just have to say a couple other little things in there to get it to 3 minutes. You know?
Yeah, for sure. That actually kind of reminds me of, I still have yet to watch it, and I'm a bad Beatles fan for it, but the whole documentary that they put out on Disney Plus about the making of their last album. It was interesting watching like Paul write songs, or how he would come up with something on the fly, and he would kind of just like not even like come up with lyrics, but he would just like make random noises or sing vocal melodies, and then he would just kind of build everything around that.
It was amazing. That was like a little holy grail thing to realize that. And it's funny to me, I think I'm pretty good at being able to pick out, if you give me a song, I can either tell you like just with a sixth sense if it's like the melody came to them, or if they were physically playing an instrument and they started to make up a melody over it. And so I guess I could always kind of tell that Get Back seemed like somebody was playing an instrument and they just, well, I need to start doing something. And so it is interesting that you see that happen in front of your very eyes in that movie. Now, of course, not everybody writes like a timeless hit like that, right?
Right.
Just by screwing around. So obviously he's one of them. But I would wager he has other. Well, he's always said like Yesterday is a song. To me, I'm like, that doesn't sound in any way like something where someone picked up a guitar and said, I'm going to play this chord and then came up with that melody. Yesterday, clearly, and he's, I think, said this since he was 22, he dreamt it, right? Like he woke up from a dream and he was singing that that melody. And so that to me seems like those are like the two different kinds of, I guess, what we'd call pop songs, right? The thing where you're either physically manipulating an instrument and you start to make up a melody over it, or the thing that just like came to you, right? Where it's like it's all there.
This is like one of the running jokes in the Beatles community right now. We're part of like a Beatles like fan group on Facebook or like meme group, and I think Paul said that about
all of his songs.
All of his songs. But he said that about Let It Be, I think. And he had said, oh, it came to me in a dream. And so now it's just this running joke that like everything that ever happened to Paul McCartney came to him in a dream. But I mean, to be able to have that power where like a song like that comes to you in your dream, I mean, if that's really the case, that's fantastic. I mean, that band was definitely not an ordinary band. There was definitely some kind of phenomenal like ability there.
I was a little bit of a Paul hater all my life, if I'm being honest. I've always been, it just turned me off most of my life, thinking I was a punk rocker. Paul McCartney. And it's only been in the last couple years where I'm like, yeah, I get it. He's amazing. I get it. He's not really so much my thing, but the recent, like the Rick Rubin documentary that he did, where he's literally 80 years old and the communication is just so beautiful. And then watching Get Back, I did think clearly he's like the person who can actually like play instruments in the beat. You know what I mean? Like, he's amazing. He's amazing. I can't be a hater anymore.
I think
me and Chris were always. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I think him and John Lennon together was like an unstoppable force. I personally cannot get into his solo stuff. Like for the 40 years of music that I have at my fingertip, I could listen to. I'm not a big fan of it. It's everything from "Please Please Me" to Abbey Road and "Get Back." That's amazing.
The way I was trying to describe it recently to someone talking about the Beatles, I'm like, when it comes to Paul McCartney, most of his best songs, like I can imagine somebody else writing them. Like I could imagine that one maybe could have been a Billy Joel song, or that one could have been an old show tune. But like John Lennon, like I can't really imagine anybody. Like it seems like it starts with him. I can't think of anybody else writing some of my favorite John Lennon songs. They just don't. You know what I mean? They really don't sound like anything else. And I don't have a much more intelligent way to say that, but some of the Paul stuff, even like the best Paul McCartney stuff, I can still kind of imagine if Paul didn't exist, I can imagine somebody else doing that, whether it's Burt Bacharach or Elton John, you know what I mean, or somebody. But some
That's
of those,
fair. I mean,
some of the John Lennon ones I just can't. And I know I sounds like a bad example because there's so many of those early John Lennon songs that just sound like the Dave Clark 5 or something, but still something about them I just can't imagine anybody else doing them, you know?
I like the argument that Paul McCartney could have written Imagine, but John Lennon could have never written Temporary Secretary. That one's pretty out there, but it's the kind of the shit that like the Beatles community just argues about.
Do you get into those the Beatles argument threads of like because the multi-tracks have gotten leaked over the years for like Rock Band and stuff, where people debating about like which Beatle is doing something, right? Because there's so much mystery a lot of the time of like, you always think, well, it's George and he played lead guitar, but obviously that's not true in the studio so many times. I go down that rabbit hole. There's like 4 or 5, not to, I don't want to waste a whole podcast, but things that really interest me about like which Beatle did it, you know?
No, and that's great. Me and Chris talk about that a lot, and that's one of the things that's great about them is they were all so talented as like musicians and could all play different instruments. So sometimes like I'm still finding out stuff like or finding out that like George Martin played or did George Martin not play the piano solo for In My Life? But anyway, stuff like that, or like there's the debate about like who sang like the background like vocals in the bridge for A Day in the Life, and like
that's one of the ones that I've been thinking about, and I want to say definitively on this podcast, we'll release it to the world. I think I haven't heard this proposed. I think now, listening to just the extrapolated just vocal track, they would clearly sing around one microphone. That's how they would do their harmonies, right? They're always live singing around a stereo microphone, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be just one Beatle. I think it's like John started it, and then Paul went and he sings the end of it. You hear someone kind of stop, and I think it's both of them. I think that's why it kind of sounds like John in places and Paul in others. I think without a doubt, it's John starting it, and then I think he kind of peters out, and Paul, I think they were just like ad-libbing around a microphone, not knowing that it would be this iconic piece of a song. That's what it sounds like to me.
I haven't heard that before, and I think I'm on board with it.
I'm on board with it too.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm completely on board for that.
We need a hashtag. Hashtag it's both.
Yes. I hear people say it's George. I'm like, it's not George. It could be.
I don't know. They all kind of had similar vocals at certain points.
I would also like to point this out because, like you said, Michael, we're always like finding new things about the Beatles. I was listening to Revolver on my turntable, I think like last week, and Yellow Submarine came on, and I finally heard George's harmony in the chorus. I've never heard him singing in the chorus before, and it's really like really low, monotonous sounding, sad British man, and I love it.
Is it one of the reissued vinyls?
Yeah, it's the one you got me.
Yeah, the vocals sound so much better on them.
I've never heard that. I never heard George in Yellow Submarine before. It was cool.
What would you like me to do? The sun is starting to set, so I might be turning into a silhouette. Is that going to kill your visual, or are we okay?
Nah,
I think we're good
Be
for it.
romantic.
you look good.
The last thing I'll say about Revolver and Beatles Mysteries, they're really difficult. It's almost existential for me because I love Paul McCartney's bass playing. That's one place I would never ever slight him. In fact, I do think he's an egomaniac about everything, but he's not really about his bass playing, which is like the one thing that I think he created, like rock and roll bass playing. He's amazing as a bass player. But she said, I always held up as like, oh, that's such a great Paul McCartney bass line. That's a quintessential Paul McCartney bass line. I love it. And then now I read that that's the one time that he even says that he doesn't think he played bass and that he thinks it was George.
Yeah.
He believes it was a time, it's a specific day where they had an argument while they were recording that song. And that bass line, which is so pronounced and obvious, even on like a little cassette tape, he says, he being Paul, says he thinks it was George Harrison, which is crazy because it sounds so much like Paul McCartney. I don't know, it blows my mind.
It's like that joke where they would ask if Ringo was the best drummer in the world, and they'd say, nope, he's not even the best drummer in the band.
With friends like that.
All right, well, let's we've kind of sidetracked going on about the Beatles. Sorry about that. Let's dive back into Meeting of Important People. So you guys have 4 studio albums out right now. Currently, you just put out a live album earlier in the year. Are there any plans for like a future studio album or an EP? Like, what's going on with the band right now? I know you guys just added some shows, and you're gonna play some more shows coming up here in the next month or two.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of like older guys now, man. It's funny. We have a great community regionally where people come and see the band, and we get airplay still, and we love doing it. It's almost more a thing for our kids at this point. It sounds corny, but our children, we all have little kids, and it's just a fun, unique thing for them to be able to do, and they're kind of like cousins to each other, you know. And it's my version of brotherhood. I don't do fantasy football, you know. This is like it's the only kind of like guy brotherhood thing that I really ever had. I wasn't an athlete or anything, so I love doing it for that reason. But that said, our drummer Matt, who I mentioned earlier, is the guy who said I know every street in this town. A few years back, he moved to Erie, Pennsylvania, which is famous from the movie That Thing You Do. If you haven't ever been to Erie, and it's on the shores of Lake Erie. So he and his family moved up there, and it's a couple hours away from us. And so we're kind of at a point where we can get together and do live events, but I don't know that logistically it's not that far that we couldn't work on new material and record. But the way that we always did that, just being together in the same town, will probably never happen again. So I don't really know if we'll record stuff like that as a band, or if I'll do some kind of solo stuff, or if we would do stuff that's called Meeting of Important People. That's me and different combinations of the band that we play with, you know. At the moment, we don't have any plans. I think the last thing that we put out was a single when we knew Matt was moving. We got together and recorded a newer song and put that out maybe 3 years ago. And on the live album, though, there is an even newer song. But that's kind of it at the moment, where we don't really have plans to do a full album. And but we keep getting offers to do events, so we still play.
That's awesome. What made you decide to do a live album at the it was like at a drive-in, right?
Yeah, do you guys remember the first fall of the pandemic? So like fall 2020, where I'm trying to think, it was before widespread vaccination and stuff. So it was the only way that people were really feeling safe to get together and see live events was staying in your car. So there were a lot of like drive-in events, at least around here. So we were asked to do a City of Pittsburgh drive-in event where we had, 80 or 100 cars showed up, and we played on a big stage, and it was projected on a big screen, and it was beamed to your radio. So you would tune in like you were actually at a drive-in.
Wow.
And listen to the car stereo. Or I think you could use an app. They beamed it to an app as well. So we just thought of it as, we didn't know I always say these dramatic things, but we didn't know if we were ever going to get to play again. We didn't know if the pandemic, how it would end, if it would end, if it would be legal for us to ever play together again. And so that at that moment, it seemed like this might be one, we don't know what's going on, but there's people here in their cars and they want to see a show. When we were done with the show, they told us that they had recorded the whole thing they had literally a line for every input. So we were given like a 30-track pristine recording of this entire show, which we had no idea that they had recorded. If we had known, we probably would have been more uptight and it wouldn't produce that. So it was just kind of the serendipitous thing where we were just having so much fun. We were so happy to be playing in the midst of this. It was already 6 months into the pandemic. We could see our friends in their cars or brave people leaning out of their moonroofs, giving us a thumbs up. And because we were kind of removed from the audience, we weren't out of breath. We weren't jumping around as much as we normally would do at a theater or club show. So we gave a little bit of a better performance when you listen back to it because we were just more relaxed, So that was the reason. They gave us the recordings, and we worked with Jake Hanner, who's the engineer, an amazing Pittsburgh recording engineer and producer that we've worked with on many of our albums. And so we mixed the album and edited it a little bit and basically put it out as the full show as a release just this past winter.
That's awesome. And obviously, I mean, we're back to live shows and everything now pretty much, but I can't help but think that like years down the line, that'll be kind of a cool like look into the window of time that was like the pandemic era. Like, oh, well, this was the only way we could play a show was to do it at a drive-in and have everybody come out. So, but it was really cool. I was glad when I saw it pop up earlier in the year, just because I hadn't seen anything from you guys in a little bit. But
first I thought maybe people would be like, they wouldn't want to go back and revisit that. I kind of felt like, oh man, people probably just want to move on and not even think of that. But it's so kitschy to hear like people beeping their horns instead of applause.
I gotta say,
make it up.
Like coming from our state where we don't have like any drive-ins at all, it's just kind of cool to see that that's still a thing that happens in the rest of the country. But so in addition to meeting of important people and the family, I realized that you have kind of like a kids band that you do, which is called Josh and Gab, right?
Yeah, that's really the only way that I ever made any money doing music. We really, and I when I say that, it sounds like I'm being super greedy or something. In other words, it's the only way that I ever like paid my bills full time as an artist or as a musician was when we created that project. My friend Gab, who you mentioned, is a great comedian in Pittsburgh. She's absolutely amazing. And this was already about 10 years ago. We put together an event for schools. We were asked, we were basically hired to put together a school assembly, like the kind that you might remember from elementary school. And it was such a success, it turned into a legitimate little business for us. Like we were kind of like small business owners where we would travel around all these different schools in our region. We'd go to other states, Ohio, West Virginia, New York, New Jersey. We performed abroad in Mexico. We were flown to a children's festival that we played. And so for years, that was really my sole job. Like that was kind of my day job. And we've really gotten back into it in the last, with the pandemic, there weren't as many opportunities to go into schools live. But now that I'm kind of back to being self-employed, we're ramping up for a big fall again. Fall was always our big time to go into schools and do shows. And it's crazy. It's like being on tour. We roll into a new school every morning, throw up a bunch of sound equipment. We put on like a punk rock. It's almost like the White Stripes. My partner Gab plays punk rock drums and I play guitar. She does interactive stand-up comedy. And so it's all wrapped up into kind of a kindness theme and a healthy decision-making theme. And now post-pandemic or still pandemic, it's kind of a celebration of creativity with kids. Like, how did you stay positive during these difficult years, when you could only see your friends on a Zoom screen?
It was really awesome. And honestly, I didn't know about it until like the last week or so when I started kind of really diving back into like your music again and researching for this podcast. But it was just cool to come across and see, I guess, somebody putting out music for kids specifically, and it has a positive message and it's fun. Like I listened to it and it sounds like you. It sounds like meeting of important people, but just like, I guess, for children, basically. And you got to go around and play shows at like school auditoriums. What was that like? Were the kids like really receptive to it?
And it blows their mind because my partner Gab is a young woman who is a stand-up comic. So they're like, we're doing, city of Pittsburgh it's like a very kind of blue progressive for like 20 miles. But then as soon as you're outside of that, it's pretty rural, man. And it's a lot of underserved communities and kids who have never seen a live concert. And they've certainly never seen a live stand-up comedian who's a woman in their face, So it blows people's minds, man. The minute we get into kind of like farmland or rural areas, it's like they think this is like seeing Lady Gaga. We're coming in with this loud ass rock and roll show at 9:05 in the morning.
Awesome.
They've been really receptive. Gabby is such a great improv comedian that and she has such a wonderful way with kids. Before the pandemic, when it was safe to share microphones, a great part of the show is she'd run into the audience and like, talk to actual elementary kids, and they'd be amplified over our sound system. Everybody was so excited to hear their friend talk. And now we can't really do that anymore because, if you use a microphone once, it's like you'd have to spray it with Lysol,
That is really cool, though. It makes me wish that I'd had things like that at my school when I was growing up. Because, like, I mean, how cool would it have been to, like, get to school early in the morning and you've got, like, an actual cool band playing music in the auditorium? So it's awesome. I hope that you guys keep doing that. And I'm sure there's a lot of kids that really, really appreciate it. And you're spreading music to young kids, too. And I mean, that's... Honestly, I'm so thankful like that early in my life, me and Chris were both exposed to a lot of music by our parents. It really has made existing in the world so much easier. I don't want to say easy, but it's made it
Enjoyable.
better.
It's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's made it more enjoyable.
Music rocks.
Which is why we do this podcast, I guess.
Music? Were they musicians as well, or are they just early on were encouraging what you guys doing?
I think
so.
Music was just always on in the house.
Music was always on. Our dad played a little bit of guitar. He was actually the one that talked me into buying my first guitar, and he taught me a few chords, and I kind of just took it from there. But yeah, growing up, our mom always played like Beethoven and classical music while we were like babies. As we got a little bit older, it became like the Beatles and like British Invasion and 60s and 70s music. And I mean, between our parents, they listened to everything. I mean, our dad would listen to like Fleetwood Mac, some lesser known 70s bands like It's a Beautiful Day. Our mom would listen from everything from kind of like the Beatles to like Tool and Soundgarden. So there was just always a wide variety of music being played.
Wonderful. Your mom listened to Soundgarden and Tool? That is really cool, man.
Yeah,
wow.
That was more so when our parents got divorced. That was kind of like her angry music pretty much. But yeah, so and she's always
very good.
She's always been very accepting about like how music has changed. Like, so Chris was in a death metal band. He was a drummer for a while, and he still does it. And she would always come out to the shows and would always be super supportive of him. She would always come out to my shows when I would play. So just a really, really cool person, and just always kind of evolving with whatever music is out currently.
I think it was really cool. There's a band that's going around right now called Turnstile, who they're blowing up. They were like an underground, like basement show hardcore band. And I sent a few songs to my mom. I'm like, hey, you might like this. It's kind of reminiscent. She's like, yeah, it reminds me of like Dead Kennedys and the Germs and all those bands. Like, Mom, you're so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really cool.
Yeah. That's I'm sure I've sent her probably Meeting of Important People too at some point. Anytime I have like an obsession with a band, I'm like, here, check this out.
Turnstile more.
So Meeting of Important People has had, I think, 2 songs in TV shows. I may be wrong. But I know Every Street was used in an episode of Ghost Whisperer, and I Can't Wait was on Jane by Design. How did that feel to you as an artist? Like, I don't know, like turning on a TV show, showing it to your friends and being like, hey, that's my music playing on there.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think. We had signed a little distribution deal where a whole bunch of our songs, some of like the instrumental versions, were used in the background of like MTV package, Jersey Shore and The Real World, stuff like that. But our bigger kind of network placements were definitely that Ghost Whisperer one, which was on like a primetime evening show that millions of people watch, and then Jane by Design, which I think was on ABC Family years later. It was good because it was at a time where that was kind of cool again, like so many people were discovering music because of TV placements, like the OC, that show that was on 2005, right?
Yep.
Everybody was discovering music from those kind of shows. And then like iPod commercials, right, would start to have like hip garage rock songs, and then Feist and when you jerk it out, doing, what is it, the Caesars or whatever, like garage rock.
Oh yeah, jerk it out.
Yeah, that's what it is. And so it actually felt like not in any way an embarrassing thing. We really thought, oh my God, when our song is on the Ghost Whisperer, this is going to be how we break nationally, because 2.4 million people watch this show, right? So we didn't know the exact context that it was going to be used in. We just knew roughly where on the program it was. And so we had all of our friends and our family gathered, and I was just praying, like, please let people hear the main hook, because then it's something that they could Google. Right. So that's all I was wanting, like, please, whatever the music supervisor did with the mix, please let them use the I Know Every Street in This Town in a way where just like 100,000 people can Google it tonight, And then, of course, whenever the episode aired, it's totally inaudible. I mean, it's in the background. I can tell that it's our song, I Know Every Street, but it was like, I think it was supposed to be on the jukebox in a bar that they were at. So it's like muffled and very low. So stuff like that. It was really, really cool. It paid well. It certainly wasn't used in a context where like you'd be able to recognize, who or what exactly the song was.
That's still cool though. I mean, because so me and Chris are kind of like, I'm sure there's a lot of people like this, but we look for new music everywhere. Like, we're always like, if I'm out about, if I'm at the grocery store, if I hear something that I like, I'm just always constantly aware of stuff that's playing, because you never know when a good song is going to pop up that you've never heard before. So in a sense, that's cool. It's cool that you guys had music on a TV show. I'm sorry that it didn't get you guys the attention that you guys deserved on it, but still really cool just to see it on a well-known show like that.
Definitely. Yeah, it was really cool. And then the Jane by Design one was definitely more audible. It was actually used as like, you could hear the vocal line as like it faded out to commercial break or something. So that one was, I think, a little more, you could prominently hear what it was.
I'm going to put a hypothetical question out there, and it's kind of a selfish question on my end, but what would it take to get like the U's music or Meeting of Important People's music for use in like an amateur filmmaker movie?
Oh, we do that all the time. We've let many different my background was cinema. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I went to 2 years of like film school in the early 2000s, and so I'm a little bit in that world, a tiny bit in Pittsburgh, and so at times we've definitely let people use our music. A number of times, I guess, when I think about it. Sometimes I've been commissioned to actually write stuff for people's projects, so like a web series, or the guy that did our Brittany Lane music video had done a series for a time, and so I wrote a little theme song for that. All kinds of stuff like that.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
We're open to that anytime, anywhere.
How about
I'm
a
not gonna lie.
podcast?
Uh-huh.
How about a podcast?
He actually, all right, so Meeting of Important People does have a song on a podcast already.
Oh yeah.
Pretty sure. There was like a podcast on YouTube that I came across, and I think Josh had slightly redone the lyrics to one of his songs for it.
What that would be? I'm trying to think. I had rewritten. Oh, do you remember what it was?
I think I don't remember the name of the podcast, but the song was, hold on. My brain is failing me right now.
A couple times where Hugh Twyman.
Yes.
Was it Hugh shows? Yeah. We have a way of explaining things to Hugh. Yeah, okay. Yep, Hugh Twyman, who does Hugh shows in Pittsburgh. Yeah, an interview series.
That was really cool. I wanted to talk about the music video for Brittany Lane for a second. What was that like making that video? Whose idea was it to do like kind of like the cardboard cutouts and like the stop motion?
The director Tom Glunt. So at the time we had signed a little like a digital distribution deal with a label called Authentic, and they gave us a budget to make a music video. So we actually had a little tiny bit of money to hire an actual director. And so we put the call out. We talked to a bunch of different directors and took treatments. And then Tom, he wanted it to be for a different song. He wanted to use that idea for Mothers Pay More, which is also on that album, which I think to this day he thinks the whole thing would have been more successful if we had done that song. But the usual thing where the label felt that Brittany Lane was they thought it would be a better lead off song to make a video for. And so we shifted the concept to Brittany Lane, but it was always going to be, he wanted to build a cardboard city. He had the idea.
How do you feel about that? Do you think Brittany Lane was the better choice for it?
Looking back on it objectively now, I think Brittany Lane is not as strong a song as other songs that I'd written at the time or that were on that album. But I guess I liked it enough and thought it was like an upbeat rock and roll song. I don't know what I thought we would fit into at the time. I guess I thought we would sound like Vampire Weekend or Arcade Fire. I mean, by the time we were doing Meeting of Important People, it was more bands like that. And so I just thought like roomy hand claps and stuff. I just thought, yeah, why not? It sounds like it'll fit into that kind of world of what people are listening to right now. But yeah, the video was always, he wanted it to be a cardboard city. And I think it was early YouTube era where there weren't a million cardboard cities already. And you could see, if you just Google like cardboard, like cardboard thing. So I think it was a pretty original idea from him. And the video went kind of viral, like not an early version of viral, but I think it got to 100,000 views pretty quickly. What's a bummer is that original master on YouTube has been long wiped by that label folded, and it was there, like they had put it up. So our plays for it are just long gone. It had all these years of comments and a ton of views, hundreds of thousands of views. And so that original version of it, I think, is gone off of YouTube, which sucks. There's like ripped versions of it that have fewer views. But at one time it was definitely, it had gotten up there. It was featured on Gizmodo, I think, which is that like tech blog. I can't remember why they featured it, but like in the first week they did a feature on it. And a lot of people like the video, but not many people like the song,
I honestly, I like the song a lot. And I've heard or read in an interview with you that you said that it's important for an album to have a good starting song or a good intro song. And I think Brittany Lane really starts that album off super well.
It was written as like a eulogy. It was supposed to be, I can't even remember what it was. It was supposed to be a list of this person's like friends and the things that they had kind of done, But yeah, so that video, we got kind of burned out from it. Never really made another video.
Yeah.
We just did like live. We never really made another like traditional music video. It's been 13 years or something.
So I saw you say I saw an interview that you did recently with a very adorable little girl. And this was on YouTube's page for Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. And I thought that was a very cool interview just in general. It seems like you definitely have a way with connecting with kids as well, which is really cool to see. But one thing that you brought up at the end of the interview that I thought was really important was you told her how important it is to have a creative outlet and to make sure that each day you do something creative, no matter how small it is. How do you do that on a consistent basis? Do you find that there are days where you're not doing anything creative? Because I mean, me and Chris, a lot of the time we get kind of caught up in like our work and everything. And just so often it feels like there's weeks or there's periods of time where we don't accomplish anything creative. And it's a real downer.
Yeah, it's funny. This will come full circle, but where I got that concept from, what famous musician said, you should go to bed every night feeling like you've done one creative thing. Can you guess? Paul McCartney. I read some interview when I was pretty young, where that was his thing. He's like, "Oh, I try to go to bed every night and feel like I did something creative." It's such a fucking Paul McCartney thing to say too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I really did adopt that, man. What happened was at the tail end of high school, I was going away to college, and I'd had some kind of life-changing stuff. I had kind of a health scare that I won't super go into, but at the time, I was pretty freaked out about my health. And I was genuinely worried that my ability to be, I didn't know what was going to happen day to day. I don't mean to make it sound that dramatic, but I was really worried about myself. And so I genuinely started to think, well, I better really do something creative every day, because I don't know what's going to happen. And so that honestly pushed me at a time where when you get to college and everybody's mostly just kind of like slagging off for years, right? Just kind of sitting around. I really tried to every day do something creative work. Is that even the best way to say it? It wasn't like I was trying to work on a song idea, but I would just try to be open to creative ideas. I would try to write down one interesting phrase that might be a song and put it in my coat pocket, right? Or I just tried to go to bed every night and feel like, even if it was, I thought of one little rhymed couplet or something. And so that carried through most of my 20s and early 30s. It's just so different now. I have like a family, little kids and stuff, where, if I'm being honest, it's almost like the moments where where a song would come to me are usually like if I'm laying in bed. And so now logistically, that means I have to get up and very quietly try to not bother my wife. Then I have to try to get my phone, and I have to get somewhere where if I sing it, I'm not going to bother my kid. And usually I'm so tired because we have little kids anyway. I'm like, is this little melody even worth me getting up and going downstairs and waking myself up this much for? So I'm smiling, but it obviously sounds a little sad, but I'm just not in the place where I'm even receptive to songs anymore, because my life isn't really geared in a way where I can even be a good vessel for them, right? So there's definitely been times where if I was 22, I would have immediately gotten up and made a demo of this song. And now I'm laying there going, oh, but I have to get up so early tomorrow, and they're going to be screaming, we have to make breakfast. This song is probably not good enough. It's probably, if it's good enough, I'll remember it in the morning, and then I never remember it now. So, but for many, many years, I really pushed myself to try to go to bed every night feeling like I'd accomplished one little creative thing, for a long time, probably from when I was 17 to 37. So, like 20 years practically, so that's pretty good.
That's awesome. And you have a lot of really great songs to show for it. So I think that's super cool. Chris, did you have any other questions before I kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, we are running a little bit long, and we appreciate you sitting in your car in front of your office hanging out with us. This has been so awesome. Michael's definitely taken the wheel with this. I do want to go back a little bit, just real quick, something kind of fun. When you said that every great record should have a great intro track, what's your example of that? Let's go around the room and share what our favorite intro tracks are.
I'm so biased to like the 60s. Okay, my philosophy on that would be there's two ways to do that. It's either the song that just completely encapsulates that band and the rest of the album. So a great example is the first song on the first Led Zeppelin album, right? Good Times Bad, where you literally just hear like, and it's like just in like one beat, you can tell this is like a whole new thing. It's a drum sound that hadn't been captured yet in any real studio, right? It's night and day to anything. It's a person playing the drums in a way that you can just tell from that first hit sounds nothing like anything else. It's like the template for modern heavy metal recording in like a second, just like a beat, you know what I mean? And then it's the complete vibe of the rest of that album. The other way that I think is a great 60s way to kick off an album would be have a song that actually isn't really like the rest of the, like Sympathy for the Devil, right, which kicks off Beggar's Banquet, isn't really at all like the rest of that album, but it's this big iconic thing at the top of the album that really isn't much at all like the rest of it. and I can think of a few others that are like that. But yeah, I'd probably say, I mean, it's so corny, but the Led Zeppelin, that to me is probably the most important opening thing on on a rock album, at least, you know.
Yeah, I love that. I think I have a similar philosophy with my pick for this. I want to say one of the greatest intros to a record, in my opinion, would be Dumpweed by Blink-182 off of Enema of a State.
It's amazing.
It's
It's
so
amazing.
good. It's so fast, it's so heavy, and it gets the point that it's a whole new turn of events for Blink since they have Travis Barker. They're on like a big label, and the chorus is so good. It's the main riff is so good. It's just the epitome of what an intro track should be for that time. Amazing.
I agree. It's I love it too because I love Travis Barker so much, and he always you're a drummer, so he always gets ahead of himself. Even with that, it's like they're not playing to a click track. Even the first beats, he's already like speeding up just the one hi-hat thing that he has to do. He doesn't have to do anything else, and he's already so excited. He's getting ahead of himself in the first 4 seconds. You know,
Yeah,
in a good way. That's a great pick.
All right, I'm gonna do two. My first one is gonna kind of go back to the Beatles, and I'm gonna say the opening track to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, just because it was different, I think, at the time than anything else really that people were doing, but it also sets the mood for the rest of the album in the way that it's kind of a loose concept that kind of, I guess, ties the whole album together. And then you've got like the reprise at the end of the album right before A Day in the Life. My other one's going to be Kissing the Lipless by the Shins off of Shoots Too Narrow, just because it just opens that whole album up with like such a great song, and it's kind of just starts it off with a bang, but it also gives you an idea of what the rest of the album's going to be like. So those are my two picks.
The Beatles thing, I would almost even take one step further, which is like if the first Beatles if Please Please Me was the only Beatles album, or even like the only rock and roll album that ever existed, I almost feel like that's kind of all you need. Like, more than that is the way I feel. Like it's just like the perfect like little 4 people playing rock and roll songs. There's some covers, maybe half of it is their songs. It's just so like perfect to me that I almost feel like you don't need. I'm so glad they did other stuff and they evolved, because then it's almost like the Ramones on the other hand. Like that first album is so good to me that I genuinely feel like you literally don't need any other Ramones stuff, because I just love as a concept. It's so it abides by like laws, right? It's only going to sound this way, and each thing will only be like that. But to me, that only really works for like one album. It doesn't work for like a whole career necessarily as well as it does one album. You know?
Yeah, no, I feel that. I think that's always been, I like the Ramones, but that's always been kind of my issue, is that I could jump from one song to another song on another album, and it all kind of sounds similar. Like, not that that's not great, but it only goes for so long, I think, before I'm like, okay, I can't listen to any more of this. But like you said, that's what was great about the Beatles, is just they reinvented themselves so many times just over the course of like 7-8 years. I can't think of another band that's really done that and had that success each time they've changed their sound.
Here's another. Okay, so 90s albums, Blur, the Parklife album, the first song is Girls and Boys, which is almost like a dance song, right? Before it becomes just a kind of a great psychedelic album. All of those. I used to think, I don't know that I feel Radiohead albums were for me the gold standard of everything for so many years, but now looking back, I don't think they have the greatest opening tracks as much as I like them. Smells Like Teen Spirit, I don't like love that song. Maybe that's a good example of one that isn't quite like all the other songs on the album. It's like
that song's giant. That song's been like so, I love that song, but it's one of those songs that I've heard so many times just from like over the last 20 years that I would be fine with listening to every other Nirvana song but that song for the rest of my life.
Me too. I can't think of the most recent. What's a good recent? MGMT, that was a really good, their first album had a really good like opening track. Yeah, I can't think of any more.
So before we wrap this up, I have one more question, And that is, if you could pick one song of yours to share with the world that would really represent your music and how you'd want to be seen as a musician, what song would you pick?
I guess I'd probably have to pick one that isn't just a style ripoff. So I probably couldn't just pick like one that's too kinksy or one that's too hooey. Well, I think, you know what's funny? I would probably pick one of our children's songs because I think in terms of actual originality, those aren't really trying to be anything else. And in many cases, they're the only times where I like have to challenge myself to, in a linear way, say a real thing that makes sense to people. You know, in MOIP songs, I can just leave it as flowery and nonsensical as I want. In many cases, they don't. There's pieces that don't mean anything; they just sounded good to me. But we have a song in our so-called children's band, 9 o'clock behind the Jackrabbit, which is no, you know what? Or Bad Person. Like when you mentioned Bad Person at the beginning of our conversation, I was almost taken aback because I don't even really think. But that to me is certainly one of the first probably good songs that I wrote. I don't have any problem saying that because it's been almost 20 years, or maybe it has been 20 years. But that's a fake. That was definitely written as I was listening to Rolling Stones albums and Brian Jones playing acoustic slide and stuff. And so it didn't really come out like that. But that's what I was listening to.
I didn't know that Bad Person or that For the Masses was that old, like from the early 2000s. Honestly, I think looking back at it, I mean, obviously sometimes when we write music, we have certain infos that we're thinking about or that kind of bleed into the music that we hear. I really don't hear anything when I listen to Bad Person besides just like you. And honestly, like finding out that it was from the early 2000s, that song felt ahead of its time, if that makes sense. Like it felt more of like the kind of like indie acoustic folk music that we've gotten over the last 10 years or so. And I really appreciate it in that sense.
It's almost kind of weird because okay, so that song was recorded, I think the winter of 2002. Like it'll be probably 20 years old this like holiday season. I think that's when it's from. If not, then maybe early 2003. But it's almost 20 years old, and it was literally I was home on break from Ithaca College. I was just in my bedroom at my parents' house, right where I'd spent my teenage years. I had originally written that song. It came to me as like a fast, like a placebo song. It was going to be like a big like drum beat. And then it turned into that kind of acoustic thing. But it is kind of weird because that was definitely before like Iron and Wine. Like a year or two later, like Iron and Wine sounds exactly like that. I hadn't even heard like Belle and Sebastian yet, I don't think, at that time. Because then after that, everyone would be like, "You sound like Belle and Sebastian." I'm like, "Oh, this is amazing." But there were so many things that like I hadn't heard Neutral Milk at the time, which it ended up on, like you said, that Pandora station.
Yep.
That was a big way that many people found out about that band at the time. It was for whatever reason it would come on after like major indie songs at the time. Like you said, I think.
Yeah, it was part of my big indie Neutral Milk Hotel playlist, which was really cool.
But I don't think I'd heard any of that stuff at the time, and I definitely like Iron and Wine wasn't a thing yet. I hadn't even heard the Shins until I think the next. I know that the Big Shins album was out, but I don't think I even really knew about that. I knew Wilco, like I was listening to Wilco, I guess, at the time, so that might kind of account for it. But yeah, so it definitely was something that was in line with what you heard a lot of then, right, through the 2000s. And to this day, it's probably someone made a YouTube video and put that song in it and has all these views. So I'll be reminded every once like a year, I'll be like, "Oh, that's crazy. There's people that know that song." And that used to be the staple of every show I ever played, certainly in the U. We play it as Meeting of Important People here and there. We've done it at live shows. It's never been quite, it's never quite had that vibe though, of that weird like bedroom recording. That's just me in my bedroom.
It's very awesome. Not a whole lot of songs, I think. Well, I mean, maybe there are a lot of songs out there like that. That's why I like doing this and I like listening to music, is because there's so many artists out there that people don't listen to, or like the majority of the population doesn't listen to. And there's so much great music to be discovered. And I think that's like your band, and definitely like the it's a really great example of that. Sometimes you just have to dig a little bit deeper to find like the really good music.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure, man. It's been a while. I wish I was as up on music stuff as I was at one time. I think I held on to it longer than most people, like into adulthood, but I'm pretty out of the loop with music stuff, man. Admittedly, I'm like, I don't know anything right now. I feel like,
I did see that you wrote a song for Meeting of Important People that you said you thought would be a good song for Lord.
Oh yeah. Which is called For the Masses. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what's funny which I think actually a pretty good MOIP song. That's on one of our more recent Meeting of Important People albums, because obviously it's a title and a phrase that I'd been wanting to write a song for that phrase for years, right? Which we had used as the album title 15 years, whatever, 12 years prior. Yeah.
Well, I think we've taken enough of your time, but we really appreciate that you sat down with us in your car for like an hour and a half, and we'll let you go. But we super appreciate you taking the time. I'm very, very happy to be able to sit down and talk with you for a little bit. This has been an awesome experience.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. We really appreciate it.
I just want to enjoy meeting you. I really appreciate all the kind words, and I'm so glad you got in touch. And yeah, I'm happy to. If there's a link I can share, I will definitely share it. So throw it my way, man. It's been just great meeting you.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Maybe we'll email you a couple of new bands you should check out sometime. Get you back in the loop,
Please do, and then listen to that A Day in the Life bridge, man. You're gonna hear it in a way you've never heard it before.
I'm gonna do it right after.
You're gonna realize.
So I wanted to touch back real quick because I didn't get a chance to say all my favorite intros. Like a boomer, I definitely wanted to throw in a Beatles intro as well, but you said Sgt. Pepper's. That's obviously like the giveaway of what the best Beatles intro track is, right?
I don't know. It's weird because like it's not even it's a song. Like it
is a song.
It's important to me, like I was saying, in the aspect that song really ties together the entire album. But as a song itself, it stands on its own, because I mean, you have like that whole story of like Hendrix pretty much like teaching himself and his band learning the song super quickly so that they could play it at their shows, like literally within a day or two after Sgt. Pepper's came out, because I don't know if it was Paul or some of the Beatles were in the audience at one of his shows, and he's like, "Hey, I'll learn this song super quickly and play it tonight."
This is gonna make me sidetrack so hard, and it's so current and needs to be discussed. So in the last episode of Stranger Things, right? Wait for the applause. Okay. So in the last episode of Stranger Things, the newest addition to the cast, Eddie Munson, who's like an '80s D&D kid, has to play music to distract these scary like devil bat things. So the song he plays is Master of Puppets. I'm sure you've seen it all go around on TikTok. That new band Metallica. Anyway.
This band Metallica is gonna blow up, dude.
Good on the Duffer Brothers for exposing Metallica. That the season takes place in 1986, and I think it is about 2 or 3 months after Master of Puppets came out. So everyone on the internet's like, "There's no way he learned that song in time, in the 3 months or whatever since it came out." But
3 months. I think people really underestimate like musicians and like how this sounds kind of like snobbish, but like how our brains work. Like a really talented guitarist, or not even a really talented guitarist, but anybody who likes music can sit there and listen to a song and figure out how to play it just by listening to it.
And Jimi Hendrix did it IRL in a weekend, right?
In a weekend, yeah.
So I can attest to it. But anyway, my intro track that I wanted to applaud as one of my favorites as a record opener is Taxman off of Revolver, and just because of the fact that this is the only record by the Beatles that starts off with not Paul or John. George Harrison he opens up the record, and I think that's super unique. And Taxman is a very rock and roll kind of song, brother, and it's just it breaks the narrative a little bit, and I think it's just all around a very different choice as opposed to Sgt. Pepper's or Drive My Car or all that.
It's a hard one because, I mean, me and you are obviously huge Beatles fans. We've talked about them on the podcast. We've done a tier listing of all the songs. Every Beatles song, or pretty much every Beatles song, is a classic. So, I mean, essentially every album opens with a classic song.
Yeah, because they're all classic songs.
Yeah. And I want to briefly go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, where we were talking about like Phoebe Bridgers and how she wished she'd written That Funny Feeling, because that's essentially how I feel about Bad Person by the U. If you haven't listened to it, if you like indie, if you like folk, go listen to Bad Person by the U. Josh wrote it when he was like real young. He was in his teens or his early 20s. It's a very straightforward, simple acoustic song, with just an acoustic guitar and a second guitar playing like these little like slide parts. It's such a cool song. I wish I'd written, and it's so underrated. It's one of those songs I feel like everybody should listen to.
I think it was a great privilege of ours to get to sit down with Josh and talk to him for about an hour, especially seeing as you stated that you wish you wrote that song, and that was like his first big song back in 2006 when it released. So this is huge, and I'm truly grateful that we've gotten to do all this cool stuff in such a short amount of time on this small little podcast. So I wanna thank everybody for listening and all that. And I would give you the rundown on our links and where to find us. But if you listen to our episodes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, see, I just plugged it. You will hear me say it at the end of every episode where you can find it. So I want to shut her down here. This was a great time. I had a great time talking to Josh, like it just happened. It was in real time. And July is just starting for the Sound Corner. We have a really great guest announcement.
I know we talked about July being really, really big, and I feel like starting it off with this podcast was really great. This was like this was such a big thing for me personally to talk to him, because like I said, I've been listening to his music for years. So that was really, really cool. You guys will see as we announce some more names over the next couple of weeks. We do really have some bigger bands coming on, and I think it's going to be really cool to see like the experience that comes from that.
I hope you guys are as excited as we are. Poppy Bingus in the overtime, so close. Hello.
In the closing minutes, the goalie's pulled.
There's no way they could lose it now.
We got open net.
I just woke up.
Work is terrible.
Yeah, too bad I have to do that tomorrow.
Same, but tomorrow is my last day of 8 days in a row, and then I get a day off.
Hallelujah, and then the weekend.
Yeah, and then the weekend.
We're working class people. You gotta respect it.
Relatable.
We're gonna shut her down right now. So thanks for hanging out, and play us off, Johnny. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a great night, everybody.